Parque Warner Madrid was the first of over 20 parks I visited while I was in Europe, and it was a great way to kick off the trip because this has a solid collection of rides. It has its share of downsides, but also has a lot of pros. So this is going to be my full in-depth look at this park so that you can know what to expect when you go to visit. Now, the first thing I want to say is that to me, this park felt like an upscale Six Flags. And for a good reason too. This park is themed to Warner Brothers, and Six Flags has a lot of those same licensed characters that this park is using, such as Superman, Batman, the Looney Tunes characters. And so much like a Six Flags, this park has all of that. Heck, they have a Batman the Ride, as in the exact same layout as the other Batman the Rides. Although this one has by far the best themed queue out of any of those. In fact, in general, I would say the theming at this park is better than most Six Flags parks. If you look at the Superman queue in Plaza, that was very well done. Not on the same level as a lot of the other parks in Europe, but to me, this felt like probably the most American park out of any of the ones we went to in Europe, with the exception of the fact that a lot of this was in Spanish. Although it's kind of this weird blend where you get some words and names that are in English and others that are in Spanish. So it's kind of interesting. Like for instance, take Superman. They have lots of comic panels in the queue and on the walls. They themselves are in English, but then the instruction signs for the ride are in Spanish. The shows are all in Spanish. I only ended up getting to see one show, and it was the Batman stunt show, and I gotta say, in general, it definitely could have been better. Like, it was fun, but it was not the best. I thought it was neat how they brought out motorbikes and involved lots of different characters, but just in general, it felt a little tacky. Could have been better executed, but the reason why I bring it up was because that entire show is in Spanish, and so I found that kind of hilarious because, one, I didn't know what was going on half the time. But two, I mean, that was my first encounter in Spain, and so here I am, an American, hearing Batman and Robin and the Joker all speak Spanish, so I thought it was hilarious. But anyways, let's talk about what you're going to see as you're walking around the park. One thing I like is how all of the midways are very wide. So it really makes you feel small because you're walking down this huge pathway with all these well-themed buildings, and you can tell that this park is prepared to receive a lot of crowds. And that is carried out through all of the different areas in this park. They got an Old West area, much like every other park in Europe. A DC themed area, naturally. A Looney Tunes section. And what I'm guessing is a Hollywood area. They got the Warner Brothers water tower. Lots of big city style signs. I mean, they have an entire Chinese theater. And again, all of it is done nicely. Like, the park doesn't look bad at all. But it definitely is not as beautiful as, say, you know, places like Europa Park or a SeaWorld park. But they do make sure that they have trees and bushes and the occasional flower. I think the things that I found to be the prettiest involved the theming. Like, take Rio Bravo, for instance. This is their log flume. This is by far one of my favorite log flumes ever. Themed to the Old West, lots of red rock work. And spoiler alert, it has a backwards section with a backwards airtime hill, and I thought I was gonna die on this thing. First of all, I did not know it went backwards, so it has this turntable. So we drop down and go into this airtime hill, and with such a minimal lap bar, I thought I was gonna fly out. It was a crazy moment of ejector airtime. The most powerful airtime I've ever felt on a log flume. So that was incredible. Do not pass up on their log flume. And actually located right next to the log flume is Coaster Express, their massive wind coaster. That was unfortunately closed, so I will not be having any reviews or thoughts on that ride. But it is massive, I'll say that. Another ride I want to talk about specifically, and this is purely for nostalgia reasons, they have a Boo Blasters, but with the original Scooby-Doo characters. So for those of you who have been to Canada's Wonderland, King's Dominion, Carowinds, Kings Island, these Cedar Fair parks all have a Boo Blasters. Back when the parks were owned by Paramount, it was a Scooby-Doo dark ride. When Paramount left, they took away all the Scooby-Doo characters and left it with Boo Blasters. So you have a lot of similarities, but it's not the same. Parque Warner has Boo Blasters, but it is the OG. You got all of the Scooby-Doo characters there. It was the weirdest thing ever for me, someone who has ridden Boo Blasters plenty of times. It was like I was taking a step back in time, but it was in Spanish. But I loved it. It was amazing. But to the average person who hasn't done a Boo Blasters, you'll probably just think it's fine. But to me, I really enjoy that. That was the coolest thing ever. To see that I was halfway around the world and I was able to do something that was almost identical to a ride at my home park, but it was the way that it was intended to be. So that's my take on Boo Blasters. Next, I want to talk about a few more rides. Stunt Fall personally was my favorite roller coaster there. Only nitpick was actually had nothing to do with the ride. This is the stupidest nitpick ever. I mean, truly, I think it is something that they should take into consideration is there is a giant tree blocking the ride entrance sign. So it says Stunt Fall, but there is a giant branch with leaves covering it so that you can't read it. It's so stupid. So Parque Warner, if you're watching this, please fix that. I'm sorry, Mr. Tree, if you lose a limb, but it is necessary. Next, Superman. Solid floorless coaster, but there's a point on it where you can reach out and touch this overgrown grass that they have growing in the center of a helix, and it hurts. So just keep that in mind. Don't reach your arm out. And finally, Batman the Ride is actually running with virtual reality in the last 3 rows. And that being said, the VR is not that bad, but keep in mind this is a Batman clone, so it's super intense. And so putting VR on it was kind of disorienting. But it was only on the back 3 rows. So hence the operations were actually not terrible because it was not VR on the whole train. Now, in terms of flat rides, they do actually have a decent amount. They have a large drop tower by S&S. They have a top spin. I didn't actually get to do either of those due to time constraints, but I could tell that they were there, and I've ridden lots of others very similar. They were running one train on all of the roller coasters, which was a disappointment. So that in itself reminded me of a Six Flags park. And the last thing that I really want to mention before I wrap this up is I did have one meal while I was at the park. It was my first ever meal in Europe, and it was at Parque Warner, and it was this weird meat sandwich, which apparently is pretty common in Spain. I thought it was alright, but it was kind of this weird meat. I don't know what it was, but it was on bread, and then there was this oil that I put on it. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, please comment below about what it was. But to kind of wrap things up, Parque Warner is a fun park. When I went, it was not very crowded at all. So we were able to hop on everything pretty quickly. I think if you're coming to this park, you can definitely spend a decent amount of time here. They do have a water park, but it's actually an upcharge, so just be aware of that. I think if I had any recommendations, stay till close, which is not very late. I'd say it was around 5 or 6. So it did close early, but most parks in Europe did close early. But they actually had a parade right before close, and it was just the song Celebration on repeat. And you know, it's a fun song and all, but after the 16th time in a row, yeah, that gets annoying. But it was kind of cool seeing all the different characters out and the different floats. So it was fun. That was one of the few parades we actually saw at any park in Europe. So it was nice to see they had that. That was probably the most crowded we saw the park was when everyone was lining the streets to watch this parade. So if you're going on a crowded day and want to watch the parade, it might be wise to get there a little early to secure a spot. But all in all, that's kind of my take on Parque Warner in Madrid. It is one of 2 parks in Madrid, so I'll be reviewing Parque de Atracciones next. That one is actually in the heart of Madrid. This one is a little bit outside. It's almost kind of in the middle of nowhere. You're just driving way on the outskirts, and then it's like, oh, look, here's a park. But be sure to stay tuned for that Parque de Atracciones review, as well as the other reviews from parks around Europe. I'm Taylor from Coaster Studios. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel, and I'll catch you guys later.